Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks. After issuing an ultimatum for the Kremlin to reach a peace deal in the next 50 days, US President stated on Tuesday that although he was disappointed with Vladimir Putin, he's not done with him. Meanwhile, Russia reacts to American threats with no signs of panic. And to discuss it, we're joined by Mark Toth, national security and foreign policy expert. Good evening.
Maciej, great to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you too. So Russia's propagandists, including the former president, as a matter of fact, clearly say that the Kremlin is not concerned about Trump's ultimatum. Now, is this a mere pause, or is Russia really prepared for more economical pressure from the US?
Yeah, Maciej, I think that's a great question because, one, Russia's putting on a little bit of a face here. There is definitely, and Europe gets the credit for this, of taking the lead to say, look, our European allies and NATO are willing to step up and to purchase these weapons and to get them to Ukraine as quickly as they can. So that's a good thing. So in that regard, Russia's putting on some face here. However, it is disappointing from my standpoint, from my country's standpoint, that Trump has now given Putin a 50-day license. Just this morning at the Hill in Washington, D.C., Colonel John Street and I, my writing partner, and I basically said, look, that's a 50-day license for Putin to kill. And I think you're seeing that, as you just pointed out in your question, in some of the reactions to this. They're not that worried with what they've seen so far. It's going to take more of a kinetic punch coming from Trump in terms of offensive weapons and what we've seen so far before Putin is going to get it. So unfortunately, even while I have nothing but absolute respect for our European NATO partners for stepping up and doing this, and it's going to help, I'm still concerned that this 50 days is just going to be 50 more days of hardship for Ukraine.
So why 50 days? Why not now?
Exactly. Right. I mean, if we believe him, and I do, that, he came back from one of these multiple conversations that he's had from Putin, and Melania basically said, hey, you tell me how great these things are, his wife, you tell me how great these phone calls with Putin are, but he's bombed, as we've all seen. Repeatedly, Putin gets off of one of these phone calls with Trump, and it's like the first thing he does is order these heinous attacks on Ukrainian civilians in Kiev and Lviv and elsewhere, this width of the country, right? Not just in the east where the fighting's going on, but in the capital, in Kiev, and obviously as far west as Lviv, in western Ukraine. It hasn't happened. And so the 50 days makes, in my mind, no sense, unless it's 50 days similar to what he had argued for Iran, that they were going to have 2 weeks, and 2 weeks turned out to be 2 days. Unfortunately, I doubt that, though. I think he does mean 50 days here to try to get Putin to come to his senses. But I might add, as I look back as a military analyst, foreign policy analyst, Biden was taking the same approach, okay? He was getting these type of weapons into Ukraine's hands as quickly as possible, defensive weapons, for years, and that didn't deter Putin. So I don't know why Trump would think, logically, that it's going to deter him now. And the threat of sanctions, that's real. And if it does come about, that's good, especially the secondary sanctions that would penalize trading partners. That would be indirectly countries like China, India, et cetera, that are doing these shadow fleet shipments of oil that's giving, an economic lifeline, if you will, to Putin. But it's 50 days too late in my mind. It should be happening right now.
Right now, as you said, Sergei Lavrov has arrived in Beijing, and Xi Jinping says the mutual trust between them, it has deepened, and Xi also declares more support for the Kremlin amidst the new U.S. tariffs threat. Now, isn't China afraid of these trade tensions anymore? They were settled not that long ago.
Yeah, I think at this point, China, and again, not to keep touting my own work, but 10 days ago I wrote about this in The Hill, that China views now this war as a useful proxy war against the U.S. So I don't think they're going to shy away just because Trump is basically saying, we're going to have some kind of secondary tariffs. China has long prepared for a tariff war with the U.S. And as we saw, as the bond market's inverted here in America, on Wall Street as well as in Chicago, China knows that they can kind of negate negate that. And so they're not as fearful of tariffs as, say, other countries might that could have a more direct impact. So I don't expect anything to change in that regard. And I do think there's a wing in the administration that's led by Elbridge Colby, a key ally, if you will, of J.D. Vance, the vice president, that naively thinks they're still going to peel Putin off from China. I just don't see that happening. Putin realizes that there'll come a day that Trump's not the U.S. president any longer. And then what does he do? How does he go back to Putin in the event of a Democratic president, for instance, saying we're going to take a much tougher line? So I think China at this point is comfortable with their hand. They want to continue to see this distract the U.S. and Eastern Europe, play it out, and make sure that the U.S. doesn't win, because then that helps them with their machinations when it comes to Taiwan.
Now let's get back to the First Lady, to Melania Trump, for a while. I'm wondering about the decision-making process in the White House, and what does the president base his opinions on? Because, I mean, you know, having a good wife is a great thing, but he's the president of the most powerful country in the world, and it has to be his wife to point out his mistakes?
Yeah, actually, you hit it on the head. I mean, he has access to the best intelligence in the world from multi ways, okay? Just human intelligence, satellite intelligence, intercept intelligence, all kinds of intelligence that should be telling him what he needs to hear. And then just what I would argue is common sense. I mean, I've been arguing this for years now, that Putin does not care, right? He's not going to change his mind. He wants all of Ukraine. Nothing's going to deter him from that until he's actually literally beaten on the battlefield. And Ukraine's willing to do that for all of us. They're willing to do that for Europe. They're willing to do that for the U.S. They just need the military means of doing so. So it's very frightening when it comes down to the president basically admitting he's getting some of his intelligence from his wife watching headlines. Now, thank God for her, right? I mean, at least as someone that was born in Europe, she can see the suffering. She knows what the Soviet Union of old meant for her people in the former Yugoslavia, et cetera, where her family is from, that she can tell that, look, you can't trust this double talk. But it is, as you point out, highly disturbing that Trump is having to hear that from his wife and is not willing, at least at this point, to be listening to that same messaging coming from his intel committee members.
Right. Now, meanwhile, the U.S. Senate decides not to push forward with its initiative on tariffs on Russia and all those who buy fossil fuels from the Kremlin, after the president declared that he would take care of the matter himself. Now, is this the right approach given Trump's inconsistency towards Ukraine and Russia in the past few months?
Yeah, Manchi, I don't think it is. I think that those sanctions should have been, especially the secondary sanctions, right? I know a lot of people are getting caught up on the word tariffs right now. Those are going to be paid by the U.S. taxpayer if they come about, okay? It's the secondary sanctions that would be affecting countries, as I just mentioned, India and the like. But I also think there's a battlefield exigency happening here in Ukraine. I mean, we've been able to detect, at least on 8 different salients, Russian salients that are happening in eastern Ukraine, where we've got mutually supporting operations at this point. We're slowly, and I want to emphasize slowly, Russia is starting to be able to maneuver. So in addition to these sanctions, there's also offensive military equipment that Ukraine needs, and it desperately needs that 155 artillery ammunition that is clearly running low on. So from that standpoint, I think this wait and see, this 50 days waiting period is not a good one, especially from a sanction standpoint, but also, you know, as I was trying to bring up here quickly, not sure how much time we have, but also just because we're starting to see slow maneuvers, slow gains. Now, these are still only in any given theater 1 to 5 square kilometers at a time, at a day. But still, those are gains. And they're not happening like they did in the past because of tactical Ukrainian withdrawals. They're happening because of a slow slog and a slow ability of Russia being able to enter, into maneuvers onto the battlefield. And that's concerning. That's got to be mitigated and ultimately stopped.
Now, in this regard, what do you make of Donald Trump's questions concerning bombing Moscow and St. Petersburg? Should we expect the U.S. made long-range missiles to target Russian capitals soon?
Yeah, and that's the big question mark right now that we're still trying to get a handle on. I've seen some reporting where Trump is saying, with a wink, wink, that, look, you can use the attack guns to strike deeper into Russian territory. And that would help. That would interdict some of these forces that are creating pressure in and around potential, a potential yet to be summer, fall, if you will, offensive near Sumy in Ukraine. We've heard talks about, potentially greenlighting JASSMs, the joint surface to air that are fired, from air to surface missiles that are fired from F-16s that could reach Moscow and St. Petersburg. So we're hearing the hint of that, but I suspect that's messaging. I don't think that Trump is there yet. I think he's trying that out. He should be there, though. That's where Ukraine should be at this point in time. And I'm glad you brought it up, because that's something, it's a capacity that Ukraine really needs to have in order to stand off these attacks that they're facing on their own capital, on their own civilian population centers in Ukraine.
Lastly, how is the government reshuffle in Ukraine regarding the U.S.? Because Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal is to be replaced by the first deputy Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko, the person responsible for the rare earth minerals deal.
Right, and you hit it on the head. Look, Kiev has learned a lesson when it comes to Trump. Bending the knee to him is probably important, at least externally. The approach that Zelensky was initially taking, even though he had every right to do it. Here's a man that's fighting valiantly for his country. I mean no disrespect to him, but to carry it out in public was never going to be a winning formula for him. I think Ukraine has gotten that message, and while they may feel that the U.S. needs to be doing more than what we're doing, at least for another 50 days, they're not going to come out and say that. I think they're really trying to solidify the working relationship between the Trump administration and Kiev. And one of the best ways to do that is this rare earth minerals deal. Because just, I think, several weeks back, near the key city of Pokrovsk, a key lithium field was seized by Russia, right? And that's something that could be an immense value to the minerals deal that Trump struck with Ukraine. And so the more people like that can emphasize where these rich, rare earth minerals are located, which many of them are in eastern Ukraine, is a good thing. So I think it's a smart move on the part of Kiev to push her out in front. And likewise, I know that they're recalling their ambassador to Washington, and I would expect to see someone similarly pro-Trump, if you will, being put in place. And I think that's a smart move.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Mark Toth, national security and foreign policy expert, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Machi. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more news, interviews and other features here on TVP World.